In today's note, we're going to be looking at solving 1- and 2-step equations. So we've looked at this in previous notes when we had to determine an equation of a line and when we looked at the skills review in the very first note. So in example 1, we want to solve. So what does it mean when we want to solve? Well, when it's asking us to solve, basically the question is asking us to find what x equals. Right, so we need to find out what x equals, or what you could think of is isolate x. Get x by itself. So if I look at the first equation, x plus 9 equals negative 3, what I want to do here is get the x by itself or isolate it. So as we've done in the past, we're going to put a box around the number we want to get rid of, in this case the plus 9. How do I get rid of plus 9? Well, I have to minus 9, or do the opposite. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other to keep things balanced. On one side, these will cancel out. I'm left with x equals negative 12, because the negative 3 minus 9. So we want to isolate x. We want to do what we call opposite operations. So opposite operations, that's where, because we were adding 9, we want to subtract 9, or we do the opposite of whatever the operation is. And we also want to think of balance. Right, so when we balance, we do one thing to one side, we have to do it to the other. So in example B, we have negative 5 minus y equals 7. So again, I need to get rid of the number, or I need to get the y value by itself. So I'm going to put a box around this number. Where it says minus 5, I have to add 5 to cancel it out, and I need to balance it to do it to the other, to keep it the same. One side cancels out. I'm left with negative y equals 12. Now you may think you're done solving. However, we want to solve for the variable or the letter itself. Whether it be x, y, or any other letter, I need that letter on its own. Looking at this letter here, I have a negative y. I need positive y. I need to get rid of this negative. So if we're not sure what to do, let's keep in mind that the negative y is basically the same thing as saying negative 1 times y equals 12. So I need to cancel out or get rid of that negative 1. In order to do that, the opposite of multiplying by negative 1 would be dividing by negative 1. So I'm going to divide the one side by negative 1, or the opposite operation, but to keep it balanced, I'm going to divide the other side by negative 1 as well. Cancels out on one side, we're left with y equals negative 12 as our final answer. So even though it's a small change of just from negative to positive, it does make a difference in our answer. For C, negative 6x equals negative 42. Again, similar to the last question, we don't see any adding or subtracting, but we should recognize that negative 6x is the same thing as saying negative 6 times x equals negative 42. In order to get rid of the multiplying negative 6, I need to divide by negative 6. Do the same thing to the other side. One thing will cancel out. I'm left with x equals positive 7, because negative 42 divided by negative 6, I get 7. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. In D, x over 3, or x divided by 3, equals 8. So here, I'm dividing by 3, so in order to cancel out x divides by 3, I need to multiply by 3, which is the opposite of division. Right? Multiplying is the opposite of dividing. So x times 3 divided by 3, I need to keep it balanced, so I need to multiply the other side by 3. On the one side, they cancel out, and I'm left with x equals 24. So these are, again, more simple ones where there's only really one step that we have to do. In example 2, this is more of an example of a two-step equation because there's going to be two steps to this. So we're still solving the equation, so basically we need to find a value for x or whatever the variable is, and we also want to check our solution. So here I have to solve 3x minus 1 equals 11. The big difference here is that I have two different things to deal with. I have the 3 that's multiplying by the x, and I have the minus 1. So if you're not sure where to start, when you have two steps like this, or two things to take care of, what you need to be aware of, or what you need to do, you need to deal with the separate term first, or the separate number first. So we need to deal with the separate number first. So in this case, the separate number is the negative 1. So the opposite operation of negative 1 is plus 1. I need to keep it balanced, so I'm doing the same thing to the other side. 3x equals 11 plus 1, or 12. Now I'm down to a one-step equation. I want to get rid of this multiply by 3. So I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides, and I get x equals 4. So I've determined that my answer is x equals 4, but now I need to check my solution. So in order to check our solution, remember, we've talked about this before, but we sub our answer back in. So I'm going to take my x equals 4 and substitute it back into my original equation. 3x minus 1 equals 11. I'm going to take this and sub it back in. So instead of x, I'm going to have 4. So 3 times 4 minus 1 should equal 11. 3 times 4 is 12, minus 1 should equal 11. 11 equals 11. They do. So that means that this is my right answer. For B, same idea. I need to solve. I have two steps here because I have two different things I have to worry about. I have the y divided by 2, and I have the plus 3 equals negative 5. Again, the same thing we want to start off with. We want to start off with this separate term first. So I need to get rid of the plus 3 by subtracting 3. Keep it balanced by doing the same thing to both sides. Y divided by 2 equals negative 8. Right, the negative 5 minus 3. And now I can just deal with the divide by 2. In this case, so show that those canceled out. Because I'm dividing by 2, to cancel it out, I need to multiply by 2 and do the same thing to both sides. The one side will cancel out, and I'm left with y equals negative 16. Again, because I think this is my answer, I need to check, so I need to substitute it back in. So y divided by 2 plus 3 equals negative 5. I've determined that my answer for y, or I found my answer for y is negative 16. So instead of y, I'm going to put negative 16 divided by 2 plus 3 and hope it equals negative 5. I get negative 8 plus 3 equals negative 5. Negative 5 equals negative 5, which is correct. So because both sides are equal to each other, that means that negative 16 is my correct answer. In example 3, I'm looking at a word problem. So I'm looking at a problem that states that the perimeter of a rectangle is P equals 2L plus 2W. And if the perimeter is 100 meters and the width is 15 meters, what is the length? So you could do this mentally, but we're going to focus on the algebra or algebraic way of doing it. And there's some key information that the question gives us, and we want to make sure that we highlight this so that we don't forget this as we work through it. Or that way, if we have no idea what to do, we can at least start playing around with some of the numbers. So we know that the formula for the perimeter is P equals 2L plus 2W. We know that the perimeter is 100 meters, and we know the width is 15 meters. And what we're solving for is we are solving for what is the length. So how we're going to start this out, because we're given a formula, I'm going to start out by writing that formula. P equals 2L plus 2W. Now that I have this formula, I'm going to fill in all the information that I'm given. I know the perimeter is 100 from the question. I don't know what my length is, so I can't replace the L. But I do know that the width is 15. Now that I've filled everything in, I'm still trying to solve for the length, or the L value. So I need to get L by itself. So I need to try to simplify and then move things across as much as possible. So I can't do anything to 100. 2L I can't do anything with, but I can simplify 2 times 15, which is 30. Now, if we look at this last line, 100 equals 2L plus 30, this is very similar to the two-step equations that we were just doing. I need to get L by itself, so I'm going to get rid of this separate term first. Instead of adding 30, I'm going to subtract 30. Do that from both sides. 70 equals 2L. To get L by itself, let's show that that cancels out. To get L by itself, because it's 2 times L, I need to divide by 2, which will cancel out on the one side, but to keep it balanced, I need to divide the other side by 2. So 70 divided by 2 is 35, which equals L, because that's all that's left over. So therefore, the length is 35 meters. For B, it's the same idea, right? Except a different scenario. So the area of a triangle is area equals base times height divided by 2. If the area is 108.5 centimeters squared and the base is 37 centimeters, what is the height? So I'm going to highlight some important information. We're given the formula of the area of a triangle. We're told what the area is, and we're told what the base is. And again, it's asking us to solve for what is the height. So I'm going to write out my formula. A equals base times height divided by 2. And I'm going to fill in as much information as I can. I know the area is 108.5. I know the base is 37, which is times the height and divided by 2. So now I'm solving for the height, which is good because that's the only missing piece that I have in my equation. If I had more than one missing piece, so I had more than one letter, I wouldn't be able to solve it. But in this case, I only have one letter, the H, so I can solve this. Now this one may look a little different because we have two things, but I don't know which one's separate. In this case, neither one is separate, they're both attached to the H, so you can start or deal with whichever one you want first. So in class, what we decided to do was, let's get rid of this multiply by 37. If I multiply by 37 on this side, in order to cancel it out, I need to divide by 37, and I need to divide by 37 on the other side as well. So by dividing by 37, this cancels out, and I'm left with 108.5 divided by 37, and you get 2.93, which equals H divided by 2. Now what we want to do, now we can deal with the 2, so I need to get rid of the divide by 2, so I multiply by 2 on the one side. To keep it balanced, I multiply by 2 on the other side. It cancels out on one side, so what I'm left with is 2.93 times 2, so I get 5.86 equals H. So therefore, the height is 5.86 centimeters. So the ideas are the same as the other examples, except we have to actually put our information into an equation before we can start solving.